Hello and welcome to the very first edition of r/books. We're going to go through the thread So Many Books, So Little Time, just see what the new comments are, chat about them, hang out. So if that feels like your jam, then grab your coffee, grab your tea, and let's get cozy. I've never done anything like this before. It could be a total flop or it could be super fun. So let's see. You let me know what you think in the comments. We are on the r/books thread, and we're just going to sort by new and see what people are chatting about in the book world. Okay, so my username is organiccrab8358. I want to change it, but I haven't been inspired. If you have any ideas, let me know. So let's see what the first one is. I see a bunch of ads. Okay. Ever finish a book that made you want to take a break after from reading? Like a break altogether, like I give up on reading. Let's see. That one book that has so much of an impact on you that you feel the need to let it linger. Okay, that I definitely understand. For a couple days or maybe weeks, months, etc. I just finished Book Thief and I'm still processing everything because, well, it had a huge impact on my emotions these past weeks when reading. I would feel like I would be invading these emotions if I started a new book right away. I made the mistake once with shows where one impacted me so much that I wanted to watch more that would have the same impact, but I ended up ruining the shows I watched after because none of them was the same as the initial. That's why with books, I feel the need to take a break after a book that truly impacted me to the point where I don't want to let go of the book just yet. And Book Thief is just one example of many that has done this to me. I'm curious, has there been a book that you just didn't want to let go because of the journey and impact? So you decided to take a mini break from reading. Awesome. Post Insurgent 117. Yes, 1000%. There are those books that you just want to grab a hold of and not let go of. I will definitely pause in between reading books if it's something that really truly had a big impact on me. Let's go to the next one. Okay, why and how is Shakespeare still studied today? Why? This is actually great because I'm reading If We Were Villains, which is very Shakespeare based. Shakespeare quotes, they're in a theater school that only focuses on Shakespeare. So Fat Cat 9000 says, I don't want to get answers of his works are timeless, his characters are so relatable, or his plays concern matters that are still relevant today. I don't personally think any of these points are particularly valid, but that's not what I want to talk about. Looking at this from a practical and historical perspective, how is it that his works have survived this long when they could have easily been lost? I know they were compiled in a single manuscript when he died, but for what reason did those manuscripts not get lost or destroyed? I'm genuinely curious about this. That's really interesting. I think part of it is habit. When we start teaching something, we continue to teach it, and then those students go on to teach it, and it just becomes this thing that never gets like lost. But how did the manuscripts not get lost or destroyed in the first place is an awesome question. How did they not get lost or destroyed? Let's see if anybody has some good suggestions. Kim says primarily it's because his plays were popular and they sold well enough to survive towards the present. Oh, geez. We're getting a little mean in the comments here. Not really going to go that much more deeply in here. So I don't know. I think that would be really interesting to dig into why they didn't get lost or destroyed. It sounds like it's because they were pretty popular at the time. I did take a Shakespeare class in college, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for this. Okay, next comment. Whoa, this one is really interesting. So Mudvik writes, can reading a book sometimes be harmful for mental health? I'm planning to read some philosophical books which are inclined towards extreme pessimism. Author Emil M. Cioran is often referred to as king of pessimism. Can his book be harmful to me? I love life and don't want to delve into negativity, suicidal thoughts, etc. I want to read his book because I'm really into philosophy, but at the same time, I don't want to lose my sanity and good frame of mind. Do you think just reading stuff can turn one into a pessimistic person? Whoa, good question, Mudvik. Oh my gosh, this is powerful. I do not think that reading a book can turn you into a pessimist, but when you're talking about a book sometimes being harmful for mental health, absolutely. When we go into book worlds, we are in that world. So if you have had trauma in your life, if you have fears or relationship concerns, and you read books that trigger those fears and anxieties in you, that could potentially be harmful for your mental health. So you do want to be mindful when you're going to be immersing yourself in a world of if it's a healthy place for you to be spending time. Sometimes, with the right books, it can help us process these emotions. It can provide a safe space to kind of feel out some of these feelings that we might not be feeling in our day to day life. I think with your question, kind of more of a philosophical book, if you're approaching it from the mindset of, I'd like to learn more about pessimism, it doesn't necessarily mean you're inviting pessimism into your life. That's my take on it. Definitely interesting. Let's see what the first couple of responses are. Into Clear Sunlight says, I think that if you are struggling with a negative mindset, feeling depressed or having depression, there is a risk that reading negative or sad content will keep you in that state. If you're in a completely normal state of mind, there's a chance that negative stuff will affect you, but that's normal. It will not cause permanent damage unless you're extremely sensitive. Blue Radium, yes, definitely, especially if you're susceptible to particular triggers. I struggle with anxiety and negative thinking, so my mental state can sometimes be strongly affected when I read sad or tragic books. Absolutely. I know that there are books when you go into the mind of that person, depending how impacted, how open you are when you're reading, you can start to feel that. I know I start to feel it. Like I start to feel the way the character is feeling, especially if it's a character based book. I just go into that world and it starts to kind of shift my perspective while I'm reading it. It's really interesting what happens. So you definitely do want to be mindful as you dig into some reads. Great question, Mudvik. Ooh, here's a good topic. Burnout on reading from college, posted by peroblanco. When I was young, I was a voracious reader. My mom read to me every day until I could read for myself. And after that, it was biweekly trips to the library to keep me in books. Pretty much all the money I ever got for allowance, birthdays, etc., went into buying new books. I also sold books I didn't have any interest in keeping to use bookstores to buy new books. Reading was pretty much my only hobby until I got to college. Suddenly, I didn't have any free time to read, and when I did, I was so burnt out from studying that I didn't want to. I will never truly understand why reading textbooks for class made me so miserable. Textbooks can be rough. Textbook writing, whew, it can be rough. I actually liked my degree a lot and enjoyed most of my classes, but I also had several hellacious semesters that took a serious toll on my mental and physical health. Finally graduated in 2019 and got an internship that turned into a permanent, albeit hourly job, which I have been so far lucky enough to keep through the pandemic. Working 40 hours a week sucks, but since I suddenly had no other obligations like homework or studying, I had free time in the evenings and weekends. So I started reading again. Not right away, actually. I got pretty into video games for a while. I started with comic books, graphic novels. Um, After quarantine hit and I had more free time, I finally picked up an actual novel. I feel like I'm finally over my burnout and it feels good. Anyone else ever deal with reading burnout? How did you get over it? Did books ever inspire you to pick up another hobby? Absolutely, reading burnout. If you are being required to read, it turns you off of reading uh, things that you really enjoy. I think this is absolutely normal, different seasons and phases of our life. There was a time where I was working full time, I was getting my master's, I had basically no social life, and I was definitely not reading for fun. I was reading lots of business books and just picking up fiction or fantasy just wasn't on my radar. And I do remember, I think it was more so after high school than after college that I did have a phase of just kind of not wanting to read any required reading. But, if you are a reader through and through, if you've had that reading experience as a young child, I think you'll always return to it. It's like in your heart, it calls you home, and you start to come back to it once you've kind of cleared out that burnout and give yourself that time and space. Ooh, this is interesting. Huxley00 says, I realized I've been going about finding books the wrong way all my life. This is a realization I had somewhat recently. It may or may not speak to other folks, but I figured I would at least post my experience and see if there was any discussion folks were interested in having. For so many years, my main book process has been one, search online for genres I like, two, look for popular, well reviewed books, three, consume books content. I think that's pretty similar to what I do, although now I'd say add in booktubers I like and admire. So let's see what this person says. I liked the system. I read a lot of books I liked over the years and consumed all of the must reads of the genres I enjoy. Somewhat recently, I decided to check out a single shop used bookstore in my area. A guy who runs it buys all the books himself and chooses what he does or does not want to buy. I took a few hours and just browsed through the bookstore and waited until something caught my eye. What I realized is that so much of my book searching has been setting criteria and finding versus letting my mind wander and find the books that triggers a response in a specific moment. Over the past few months, I've found, bought, and read the following types of book. A book about bog people. Bog people are bodies found in bogs around the world that are preserved in near perfect condition. What? So much so that you can tell what someone ate 2,000 years ago, as well as their facial expression at death and what their hair was like. That's interesting. A book about women's manners that was published in 1880. I don't know if I've read anything that far back, but I have read Miss Manners, and it's pretty interesting. What was expected, what was proper manners, and what was the best way to live as a proper woman. It was intensely interesting. A book about a guy who did a road trip along the Great Wall in 2007. He wrote about China, what it is to be Chinese, and the modernization of China looks like, and everything in between. This book was enthralling. Obviously, things really limit what we do and what we should do in a public space now, but I really benefited from this experience and wondering if anyone else has anything to say about this process of finding a book to read. Okay, yes, 1000%. I love just wandering through a bookstore, wandering through the library, looking for those covers that are going to call me in. I definitely have certain sections that I tend to go to more, but I'm not afraid to go out of my favorite genres and look around. So I'm with you, Huxley00. I think it's good to kind of break out of our norm every now and then. Okay, this is interesting. Lemon Lord 7 says, how and why did psionics become so prominent in sci-fi? Psionics is all about that brain power, yo, reading minds and lifting things with your mind. Although Star Wars turned psionics into the Force with philosophy, morals, and spirituality built into it, the power shown is exactly what psionics is about. But Star Wars wasn't the first to do this. Both before and after Star Wars, we see so many instances of the characters with psionic powers, but from I experience we don't really see other types of magic systems very often in sci-fi. Harry Potter spells, but in space. So I asked you, how and why did psionics become so prominent in sci-fi while other magic systems were left out? I don't know that they were left out. I would love to hear like which magic system you feel like you're missing out on. I think that psionics, if I'm saying it right, is popularized because this is something that we crave as humans. Like, what if we could shift or change or grab a hold of this thing or do this thing just with our mind and our mind alone? So it's interesting to us. We're intrigued by it, and it almost seems possible for us, whereas maybe some other magic systems seem more far-reaching. So there may be power in this one sticking around because it seems like maybe if I just think hard enough, I could do this thing. I could figure it out. I could figure out how to bend that spoon or call that thing to me or turn the light on. But I'm not sure that other magic systems were totally forgotten. I don't see any comments that are really supporting this. I think there are so many magic systems out there and may just need some searching around to find some other ones. Ooh, this is interesting. So I am thus says, why can I all of a sudden not read to save my life? I would call myself a pretty good reader. I've been reading books most days since I was like 8-ish, but I've recently been struggling to read sentences, and I've been adding, removing, misreading words. I have no clue why it just came all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it's not like a thing I realize I've done. Often people tell me that I've done it. Today, I spent more than 20 minutes just trying to read an extremely simple sentence of no more than 15 words. Does anyone know what this might be? Whew. Sending you lots of love. I am that. Maybe a good idea just to check in with your primary care physician just to make sure, maybe just get some tests run. But to me, it definitely sounds like overwhelm and stress. And this past year, what we're currently living in has been one of the most stressful times. All of us globally on Earth, it has been stressful. There has been a lot of unknown. And so our brains, our bodies, our energy is kind of filled up in a way that we are not used to. And if we're filled up with all that clutter and stress, it can be really hard for our mind to do some of the most basic things that it's used to doing. So I would definitely recommend some time just like breathing, maybe deep breathing, maybe doing some breath work, just allowing yourself to clear out the clutter so you have space. It's almost like you're too full of information that your mind and your body's not allowing new information to come in. Geek Chick 85 says sounds like brain fog. Lists some questions. Interesting. Someone mentioned iron deficiency. Whew, I don't know. I would definitely reach out to some support people to try to see what that might be for you. Okay, this one looks good. Antifragile 1216. Not sure who needs to hear this, but you can leave a book midway if you realize you don't like it. I've seen a lot of people feeling guilty about not being able to complete reading a book. There was a time when I picked up a book, didn't like it after going through 30% of it, but still continued to finish it. Or when wasn't able to finish it, I felt bad for some reason. I don't think it is the right way. Just because you picked up a book and spent some time reading it doesn't mean you have to finish it after you don't like it. It's a sunk cost. What do you guys think? Absolutely. I used to be somebody who forced myself to finish books, and I just don't do that anymore. I kind of just go by a gut feeling if I think that it will turn around. I will maybe check a couple of reviews if people are like, this is worth it. I promise, just make it through chapter XYZ, and they're readers that I trust, then I'll go for it. But for the most part, put it down. My husband has a huge habit of just reading a couple chapters of a book and then leaving it. Doesn't bother him. It's just the way that he reads. Okay. This is the last one that we will do today. Sounds super interesting. Deputy AJ Gale. Books you read as a child, as adolescent, that upon reflection truly shaped your way of thinking. This was inspired by recent posts on a few subs I've seen where people talk about not retaining anything from books once they finish them, be it weeks or months later. While I agree remembering specific plot details after a while is uncommon, I retain plenty from every book, short story, etc. I've ever read, some more than others. And then we go into kind of long description here. This is why fiction is so important to so many people. It isn't just the act of getting lost in a book and then being able to tell someone about it later. It's letting the author's world wash over you so much that you're pulled out of your own mindset and forced into the perspective of the protagonist. This got a little longer than I expected, but I really want to hear others' views on this. And if anyone has a book they read either in childhood or a long time ago that shaped them in ways beyond just a story. Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned retention because I've mentioned that in a couple of my videos. I think about how I don't necessarily retain the plot information or book details after I read, but the immersive experience that I have is so strong. And so I think when I was little, the books that have had really truly the most impact on me and who I am today are all of those books that were like Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, the Boxcar Children, where there's really this sense of adventure. Yes, Pippi Longstocking. I mean, come on, where children are like the leaders of their lives. They're strong and capable and adventurous. And that we have so much power and strength within ourselves, no matter what the situation might be. All of these ones that are kind of adventurous and um, taking our lives into our own control stuck with me. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that. I would love to hear what books growing up shaped you and who you are. I think that those books that really portrayed the characters as hopeful, realistic, and resourceful just still sticks with me to this day. Okay, so that's the end of our r/books experience. What did you think? I had fun. I would love to do this again if you guys would. If you know of another r/ that you think would be great to walk through, let me know in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to do that as well. I hope you had fun. Thank you so much for hanging out, and I will see you in another video very soon. Lots of love. Bye, guys.